I just need to share a small Gemara first as a Hakdama. The Gemara in I apologize. The Gemara in Sukkah brings in the Mishnah that Rebbe said about his servant Tevi, that Tevi Avdi does X, Y, and Z. The Gemara learns from there that the Mikan, that Sichas Tamid Chachamim, and Rashi says Sichas Chulin Shel Tamid Chachamim, the idle speech of Tamid Chachamim, Tzrichim Limud. It needs to be. We have to, we got to go through it because there's something in there. Additionally, the Medrash says that Yafa Sichasan Shel Avdei Avis, the prattle, the talk of the Avdei Avis is more important than Torah Shleimah. And how do we know that? Because the Torah repeats Eliezer Eved Avram's discussions twice in the Torah instead of saying other dinim. Now, just keep that in mind as we're going to discuss. That there's a value in discussing, so to speak, Sichas Chulin, or the minute details, the minutiae of the details of different Talmidei Chachams and Haggis, because you could learn from that. Now, I want to also start with an ironic detail. In the Sefer Makar Baruch, from Baruch Halevi Epstein. Baruch Halevi Epstein is the son of the Aruch HaShulchan. He was the Netziv's brother-in-law and nephew, I think. I could be getting his family yichus a little bit confused. In there, he has like a 4-volume... a 4-volume autobiography. And in there, it's like a lot of rambling, it's a lot of interesting things. And in there, he brings a quote that he heard from someone he knew about a Rav in Vilna, whose name was Rav Yecheskel Landau. Rav Yecheskel Landau was the inikel of the Knesset Yecheskel. He says Rav Yecheskel Landau used to tell him that he hated when people would say over Meifsim stories about the Gaon, he says. Why? Because he was a big misnagid Hasidim, this Rav Yecheskel Landau. And he said that if we say over stories, if you say over stories about the Gaon that are Meifsim, then you're no different than the Chassidim. The Chassidim are going to be able to say that you're also just saying over Meifsim stories about your Rebbe. And Mamela, this Rav Yecheskel Landau was very against saying over Meifsim stories about the Gaon. And anything that was involving the Meifis, he tried very hard to cover it up. He wouldn't really talk about it. This Rav Yecheskel Landau was the last Ravid, the last head of the Bezdin of the city of Vilna. After that, there was no more official Ravids in the city of Vilna. So he was a grace to mention the time of the Gaon, and he had this particular aversion to sharing Meifsim about the Gaon, because he felt it undermined the battle with Hasidim. This is what the Makar Baruch brings to him. Now, to me, it's very ironic, because one of the main Meifsim that they say over about the Gaon happens with this Rav Yecheskel Landau. And it becomes, there's 4 different versions of the story, and it's punked about him, who hated to say over Meifsim about the Gaon, that the story, the most famous Meifis about the Gaon, and one of the most famous Meifsim about the Gaon, took root. Now, what is that? What am I referring to? So as follows. There's a story like this. Rav Yecheskel Landau got married when he was 14 years old. Yeah, it was normal in those days. You're talking in the late 1700s, No, it's in the late 1700s. This is normal. He got engaged. He got married when he was 14, and his shver was someone who lived in Vilna, who brought him to the Gaon to get a bracha. It's unclear when exactly this was. Either he was a chassin, or it was the Shabbos Shev brachas, or it was the Shabbos Ufruf. There's many versions to every detail of the story. He brought him to get a bracha. And the Gaon was sitting, and either it was Shabbos or it was Cholamayid Sukkos. A lot of different versions of the story, but the Gaon was sitting and he was eating kugel. And he was eating kugel somewhat with his hands. And his hands were oily or greasy. And he picked up his hands to put them on the strimel, where everyone wore a strimel back then, on the strimel of Rav Yecheskel Landau and give him a bracha. And this young Bacharol / man who was 14 years old saw the Gaon's hands were a little greasy, and he recoiled. He pulled back his strimel from being touched by the Gaon, and the Gaon only managed to get one hand on his strimel. And the Gaon put a hand on his strimel and he said, "Yivrach Hashem Yishmerecha." He said the whole Birchas Kayanim, and then he pulled back. And supposedly this Rav Yecheskel Landau lived well into his 90s, never needed glasses, never needed a walker, was healthy well into his 90s. One second. So this is a good part of the Shaila. Hang on. Everything you can think of, there's a nusach for. He lived well into his 90s, and he used to say, "What an idiot I am that I only let the Gaon get one hand on my strimel. I should have let him get both. Who knows how long I would have lived." He always kicked himself that he pulled back, and the Gaon only managed to get one hand on his strimel. Version number 2 is that the Gaon reached out with his hands and touched the strimel, got both hands on the strimel, and left, 10 marks, 10 stains on the strimel from this bracha. And Rav Yecheskel Landau, as a young man, was very, he ruined his brand new strimel. He was upset. But as he matured and he realized what a privilege it was to have a stained shtreimel from the Gaon, he set aside that he bought himself a new shtreimel so that he wouldn't ruin this one. He set it aside and he only wore this shtreimel on Yom Kippur. The shtreimel that the Gaon, stained on Yom Kippur. They wore, when? Like by night? Yeah, whatever, Oh, when you take it off, yeah, I don't know. Cash off a maisa. I'm saying? Cash off a maisa. So, now, Rav Chaim Kanievsky had another cash on this maisa, interestingly. Rav Chaim Kanievsky was asked what he thinks about the story, and he said to him, it's Sarachian, that the Gaon would put his hands that are greasy onto a shtreimel. You're damaging the shtreimel. How can you damage the shtreimel? So he said, unless you say that the Gaon had verstanden, that ultimately this would be a badge of honor for the shtreimel, and then really it's allowed. This is Rav Chaim Kanievsky had this discussion. Alternately, there's a whole different version to this story that goes as follows. And this is the version that the Torah Tamima himself brings down in Parashas Nasa in Chumash. Torah Tamima brings down that the Gaon, this young Yecheskel land that came to get a bracha from the Gaon reached out with one hand and put it on his head and said Yivarechecha. Says the Torah Tamima that it was on purpose. It wasn't like by accident. It wasn't a story with dirty hands and dirty shtreimels. It was on purpose. The Gaon put his hand on the shtreimel with one hand because the Gaon was makpid only to give a bracha with one hand, not to give with two hands. Now,
the left hand?
No, it didn't say which hand, I don't think, but he gave with one hand. Now, that's the part of the nusach of the story that I want to discuss. That's the part that's interesting to me. The dirty shtreimel, the stained shtreimel, pulling away, ahina hair, that's not so important to me. The nusach that I want to talk about is the Torah Tamima's nusach that infuses some real halachic value into the story. He says that the story...
What's interesting about the story is that Rav Chaim Kanievsky is the one who said that he
understood
the value.
That
means Rav Chaim Kanievsky understood the value of his relics.
Probably not.
And yet he never even put that in the will.
In any case, the version that I want to talk about is the Torah Tamima's version that says he put his hand intentionally, one hand on the shtreimel, because he held you couldn't put two hands on the shtreimel. Now, I do want to note that Lichtner Kaf, I don't remember where or when I heard this. Lichtner Kaf I once heard B'Shem Chavetz Chaim. And Chavetz Chaim said it's pashut to him that someone who understood learning like the Tzais never had a geshmak in a piece of kugel. I think this is a quote that they say in the name of the Chavetz Chaim. It resonates with me rather than a certain level. Of course, the Tzais ate kugel. There's nothing, the Tzais was human. He ate kugel and he ate whatever the food that they served him. But the resonance of that, it's not possible that someone who understood Torah like the Gaon enjoyed a piece of kugel, to me rings very true. And is likely equally true, or maybe even in a greater measure true about the Gaon. So any story that really focuses on the Gaon's... No, one second. I'm just saying, to me, any story that focuses on the Gaon's kugel eating and his greasy hands is to me a bit of a Misa story. That's just a personal aversion that I have to the story. So I want to talk about the version, the Torah Tamima's version, that makes it a purely halachic or Kabbalah or Kabbalistic discussion about how to give brachas. So now, really the Makar, if you want to start thinking about it, where does this whole idea of giving brachas to people like this in this manner, saying Yivarechecha as a bracha, all this type of detail, and in some, we'll talk more about where the pratim of the minig are. The first place is actually in this week's parasha, Vayechi. When Yosef brings his two children, Ephraim and Menashe, to his father, Yaakov Avinu, and he asks him to give a bracha. So Yaakov Avinu takes one hand, Sichalas Yadeh, right? He switches his hands, and Ephraim and Menashe, he gives them each a bracha. So now, over here, clearly we have no raya to how bracha is supposed to be given, because Yaakov Avinu was in a pickle. He had two children. He had a problem. He didn't want to make one go ahead of the other one because he held that the younger one should go in front of the older one. So in order to avoid choosing the younger one in front of the older one, he did them at the same time. Once doing it at the same time, he wanted to prioritize one end of the other. So Yaakov was in a predicament. Yaakov was in a pickle. Yaakov was in a specific predicament over here. He had to do it the way they had to do it. There's nothing to really be implied from there. Yaakov Avinu's bracha that he gave was Hamalach HaGoy Eloisi, which is different bracha, not the bracha of Birchas Kainim. So there's not much to learn from there in regards to our actual discussion of how and when parents or grandparents or in the Sephardic community many other times, dozens of other times, give brachas to this matter. There's not much to learn from it. Now, rather, before I move on to the actual sugya of Birchas Habanim and the Kabbalistic and halachic details, I do want to share a funny story. I've heard my father said this over years ago about Yaakov Avinu's bracha of Hamalach HaGoyel. The Sklender Rebbe lived in Romania until 1956. He used to tell over a story when he came, the Alta Sklender Rebbe. It's actually the Alta Sklender Rebbe already. He used to tell over a story that he once had a couple in his Kehila in Sklen. The husband, he said, was a Rumenische, from local Kehila, and the wife was a Hungarian, and there was fire and Wasser. These two, they couldn't, they fought about everything. So most of the time they came to him with these very silly shilas. It was an Amaratzistic couple. They came, By uns the minig is to eat Lakshan Kugel Friday night, and he said my minig is to eat Kartoffel Kugel, and they fought about that. Or, silly little machliks when these come. He says, this husband comes to him, and he tells him, this is a deal breaker, Rebbe. There's no way you could talk me out of being angry about this. He says, what happened? What'd she do now? He says, I was watching her tuck our children into sleep at night, and she's singing them like people sing to their children. Now she's singing Hamalach HaGoyel, and she says, Hamalach HaGoyel Loisi Mikol, pause, Ra Hu Yivarech Hasana Arim. And he says, I corrected her and I told her, no, it's Hamalach HaGoyel Loisi Mikol Ra, the Malach who watched me from all evil, not Ra Hu Yivarech Hasana Arim. She told me, you don't know what you're talking about. By uns, this is how we do it. Ra Hu Yivarech Hasana Arim. This husband, this exasperated husband, tells his plan, there's no way you're going to be able to talk me out of this. She's something wrong with her. It's a dud. There's something wrong with her. So he tells her, no, relax, my kid. I'll explain to you what she's saying. He says, the Gemara in Shabbos tells us that on Shabbos, 2 malachim follow a person home from shul, and they survey the scene in the home, and if things are good, it's one malach with a good eye, one malach with a negative eye, they survey the scene, and if it's good, the malach who's memuna on good says, so it should be like this next week as well. And the Malach Ra has to answer and say, yeah, Kain Yiratzim. He has to go along with it. And vice versa. If it's bad, the Malach Ra gets to take the lead and he says it should be like this next week. And the Malach Tev has to go along with it. So the Slender Rebbe said, you don't understand what she's doing is she's benching your children. It should be so good that the Malachim Roim would have to sign on and say, yeah, it should be good like this again. Meaning just like the Malach and the Gemara in Shabbos, when it's good enough, even the Malach Ra have to get on board. So she's benching you. Malach Hagay Mikol, Rahu Yivarach Hasanarim. Even the Malachim Roim should bench the children. Now, yeah, good catch. Nice, good kisher. And yeah, that's Yaakovinu's bracha. Now on to the regular bracha of Yivarach. So there's 2 components to handle over here in this shaila of benching with 1 hand, with 2 hands, this nakuda. So first let's just talk about where the core minig comes from. So there is in the Sephardic world, the minig is much more rampant, right? I'm saying I think Sephardim bench Yivarach by a chuppah, I think they bench Yivarach by a bar mitzvah, they bench Yivarach, I think in some kihilas, I don't know which kihilas, some kihilas, they bench Yivarecha, obviously to children, but it's much more common to say the bracha, even not Kehanim, even just to use Yivarecha in that manner. But by Ashkenazim, primarily the time that you see this minig, in play, is the minig that Friday night, either before the Suda or after the Suda, but mostly before the Suda, when you come home from shul, the minig is as follows. It's brought down in the Sefer Maver Yavik, that's the first place that brings it down, but from there it's brought down in many other svarim. I can read from the Maver Yavik. Maver Yavik says as follows. He says, we're coming from shul, Kishayasim Adam Yadai al Rosh HaKatan, when the man puts his hand, now pay attention to the diak, Yadai, not Yadav, Yadai, his hand, al Rosh HaKatan, on the head of the child, Mevarech Misbarech. The child gets bracha from that. Shenema v'yishlach Yisrael siminoi, like it says in our parsha, that Yaakov put his hands on the head of the children. Fine. That's it, fine. Now he says, a minig levarach, says the Marviyavik, this is, he institutionalizes it, minig levarach b'Shabbos Kodesh, b'frat b'leilei Shabbos. The minig is to do this, to bench the children on Shabbos Kodesh, and b'frat on leilei Shabbos. Why? Soid Shabbos Malchus Hashem, bina v'tferes lamata b'malchus Yisera. We won't go into that. B'm yesh le'bas, says the Marviyavik, if you have a daughter, gam hi yivarchena, b'frat b'leilei Shabbos. Even the daughter should get a bracha. So this is where the minig starts. It's an Italian minig. I think originally the Marviyavik is from Modena, from Italy, from Modena. It's an Italian minig. You see this in other places. The Pachad Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak, more importantly, from Italy, quotes it. It starts from an Italian minig to bench the children, and there's some sort of idea that bracha is sheira through the father or through the parents' hands, on Leil Shabbos in particular, and we bench them. And you here in the Marviyavik, it doesn't even say to say Yivarechecha. To say Yivarechecha is seemingly some sort of later addition to actually say Yivarechecha. But this is the idea of giving a bracha on Friday night. Now, it's interesting is that there's another minig, and this is probably less widely adhered to, and that is the children are supposed to kiss their mother's hand. How many people do that? Do that? Right? So that's not as widely. Now, it's interesting. It's interesting. The Marviyavik brings them together. Meaning,
only Friday night.
No, I'm talking about Friday night. A lot of the svarim that bring this minig of the father giving a bracha do it like in order. They say the children come home, kiss the mother or the father's hands, and then the father takes his hand and puts it on the child's head and says, Yivarech Hashem Yishmerecha. Like, it seems to be like it's a sequence. Like the children do some sort of humbling or kfifas kaima or whatever to the father.
Give multiple kisses.
Yeah, but this is just one kiss on the hand, and not on the face, both sides. This is a Yiddish Italian minig that says this. To kiss the hand. Now, it happens to be, when I was looking through this, I came across such a strange thing. I hope this is nobody's minig. If somebody is, please say it and then walk out. In a sefer from Reb Meir Paprash, which has since been edited, because I saw a later edition and it's not in there anymore. An early edition has, but a later edition doesn't have it. It says that the people come home, they kiss the mother's hands if the mother's alive, and if the mother's not alive, kiss the mother-in-law's hands. That's what it says. Now, could be, so there's a few different elements. Could be it's talking about children kissing a grandmother's hand. It's not talking about like the Rosh Mishpacha. It's talking about like children of the household kissing a grandmother's hands, but it's hard to understand it exactly. I don't know. We'll leave that off in Zeit, you know what I'm saying? And the Poskim don't say that. So we'll leave it on the side, and I see that the Gears has been changed, possibly in later editions. We'll leave that on the side. It struck me as interesting, so I'm sharing it. But in any case, there's this thing. So now what is this shmooze about one hand or two hands in regard to this bracha that's shayra, this bracha? So the Yaakov Emden, so this is what's brought down. The Diik in the Mariyavik says Yadai. Now, other Kabbalah Svarim, Mashal the Pachad Yitzchak, is not really Kabbalah, but other Svarim clearly emphasize that there's something special about one hand for bracha. Now, why? It's brought down that the hand is comprised of 15 bones. Don't try the math. Comprised of 15 bones. 15 words is how many words are in the Psukim of Yirechacha Hashem V'Yishmerecha. So, Kilu, the bracha of Yivarechacha is best transferred, or is most aptly transferred, through a blessing with one hand, which comprises 15 bones on the head of the child. Now, the problem is that there's much more bones in the hand than 15. That's the problem, the real problem. Now, I'm not just asking that as a cynic who's seen an X-ray, but there's a Mishnah in Alis that says that there's 30 bones. When the Mishnah describes bones that are sized for Tumah, the Mishnah in Alis, I think it's in the 6th parak, says there are 30 bones. Pisas Hayad, or whatever, has 30 bones in it.
15 main bones.
So, it's not even true. So you have to start spouting. There are clusters of bones, or there are groupings of bones. Not each bone is counted individual. In the Mishnah also, it's more counting individual. Over here, it's not counting as individual.
I understand. According to that sheet, they probably don't do 2 times chai, right?
I don't know. So this is like a shvara thing that it's 15. But in any case, this is brought down that that's like a rationale. Now, other Mekubalim say, but afka to do with 2 hands. Why? Because 2 hands is Eser Sfiris. 10 fingers is 10 Sfiris. Eser Sfiris. That's a way to transfer shefa. I'm just quoting things I don't really understand, but these are different things. So basically, it's a machlekes amongst the Mekubalim, like what the accurate way to transfer bracha is. Where this really shows itself is in Simon Kuf Chavchas and Ilchos Nesiyas Kapayim. So there's probably, I don't know, between 6 and 10 shittas on exactly how Kehanim are supposed to hold their hands when they duchen. Who's a Kohen here? You're a Kohen? So this is like between, I'm sure you have your way, but there's 6 or 10 shittas, starting with their own ways, right? There's 6 or 10 shittas amongst all the places and how Kehanim are supposed to hold their hands. And if you look, let's say, in the Svarim that handle it, Be'ikr, if you look in the Mukar Rechaim from the Munkat Rebbe, he explains how it's not just him, it's everyone, the gaps between the fingers, the Shechina is coming through, Tzinoiris, the Dashim Psukim. So there's much to be said in the Mekubalim about hands and the transfer of bracha.
It's a little hard to understand this because you're saying that the hand, the gra, there was no clarity if it was a right hand or a left hand. If the hand was so significant, one hand, that should have definitely been
There's
a
not
right
a lot of
hand.
clarity in the story with the Gra B'chal. There's 10 versions.
It should have definitely been a right
Yeah,
hand.
there's 10 versions.
He said Yeminai.
Yeah, he might have said Yemina. The Mavriyavik said Yemina. Yeah, but in any case, so I'm just showing, even in the Mekubalim itself, there's 30, the whole arm?
Yeah, because this is 27, 29, 30.
Okay, so whatever, you looked at Mishnah Alis? No, yeah. You mean chat? You Googled it? Oh, okay. No, I'm just saying, yeah.
No, it said 27.
Okay, in any case, I'm just saying, al pi Kabbalah, there's great significance in the hand, in the transfer of bracha. Yeah, no, but I'm talking about specifically the hand. Seemed to be like a big transfer point of bracha. And Hayos on Friday night, we're trying to bench our children and transfer over the shefa to the children. So it has to be done in the proper manner how to do it. And this is the Kabbalistic aspect. Now, the Yavitz, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, in 2 places, in a Tshuva and Shelos Yavitz and Chelik Beis, and in his Siddur on Beis Yaakov, Siddur Beis Yaakov in the Chelik of Shabbos, the Yavitz comes down very strongly that you have to do it with 2 hands. He says you have to do it in 2 hands. This is the time Sha'oz Chal HaShefa, and it's important to do it with 2 hands. And in his in the Tshuva, he even says, he brings that the minig of his father Chacham Tzvi was to do it with 2 hands. And then he ends off with this like cryptic quote. He says, "Shesoid habracha biyadayim." The soid of bracha is in yadayim, whatever that means. So like, I'm just exposing you to the fact that there is a great discussion amongst the Mekubalim as to how exactly the soid of bracha is transferred and how exactly that works. But the Yaakov Emden, who was also very well versed in Kabbalah, is mentioning this and saying strongly to do it 2 hands. So there's a big machlekes haposkim 1 or 2. So in any case, the Torah Tamima's opinion that the Gaon would have chosen b'dafka to do it with 1 hand or in a specific manner Could be because of a Kabbalistic thing. Because, this is the right way to do it, the Kabbalah. Now, there is one other source that seems to imply this, is that the Gaon himself didn't have the minhag to bench his children every Friday night. But in the Sefer Aliyas Eliyahu, it brings that right before the Gaon was nifter, the last year before he was nifter, on Erev Yom Kippur, he called in his children, and it says, "V'sam yadai al rosham u'bircham." He put his hand on their head. Now again, it's one hand. So seemingly there is some sort of implication or indication that the Gaon was makbid to do this one hand. Now that's all Kabbalistic aspect. Now there's a whole different halachic aspect that could be the reason for this, and that's as follows. There's a Gemara in Ksubis, and Daf Chav Daled Amud Beis, that says that for a Yisrael to be Neisek Kapayim, for a Yisrael to duchen, he's over ba'aseh. He's over in an aseh. Now Rashi explains what that means, because the pasuk says, Koi Savarchu es b'nei Yisrael. Koi Savarchu means the Kohanim should do it. You should bench, but not Yisraelim. The La'ava b'machal aseh, asehu. That's what Rashi says. So it's an aseh, it's an Isra aseh for a non-Kohen to bench, to do duchenim. Now, is it? Could be. But this is the Gemara in Ksubis. This is like the main sugi is the Gemara in Ksubis Chavdal. Now the problem is, there's a Shara Taisvis. There's a Gemara in Shabbos, and Daf Kuf Yud Ches Amud Beis, that says Rav Yosi was once saying that I never violate the takanas of other chachamim. He says, Yodei ani ba'atzmi, I know about myself, she'eni kohen, that I'm not a kohen. Im yoimru li chaverei alei l'dochen, if my friends, my chaverim, the other chachamim would tell me, go dochen, hayisi yoyle, I'd go up and dochen. Now Taisvis comments on the side of it, there's Ak Taisvis, the Ri didn't know why it's asr to dochen b'chlal. Why is it asr b'chlal? Unless, says the Ri, maybe because it's a bracha levatala. Because you're not mechuyev and you're making a bracha on it. This is what the Ri says. Now it's like a cryptic line in the Ri over there. The Grader Kiveger and the Gilead Hashas on Shabbos of Another, there brings a whole collection of Taisvisin, where Taisvis does this like any idea, like stylistically, like someone didn't know something or Taisvis didn't know. It's interesting. Taisvis usually has questions, has answers. Taisvis doesn't often say like, I don't really understand what's going on here, and just walk away. That's not really Taisvis's like style. So Kiveger makes a collection of like the 5 or 6 places offhand. I'm sure today with it's our Chachma searches and computers, you can probably find more that are similar or whatever. Kiveger makes like a little collection of them that any day has. But in any case, this is Taisus. So comes along with Achronim, the Darkei Moshe, the Bach, others, and they have to resolve, how did Taisus miss a Mefurish Gemara? Meaning the Gemara in Ksubis Daf Chav Daled is so clear that a Zahar is not allowed to duchen. It's even Basei. Taisus comes along and says, I'm not really sure what's wrong. Like, Taisus couldn't miss a Mefurish Gemara. So says the Bach, and this is the most conclusive of all the different answers. The Bach says like this. The Bach says it depends how you're duchening. I want to read from you for a second. The Bach says, he says like this. This that Rabbi Yossi says, V'adei Rabbi Yossi la'alas l'duchen l'varach chamar, el shayim mevarach b'lei prisas yadayim. He would do duchening without stretching his hands out in the way that Kehanim do it. V'gam le'birach hasher kitchanu, he also didn't make the bracha. V'svirulei, the isra asay leka ele b'mevarach v'nesiyas kapayim. The isra is only when you do it without stretched hands, with the bracha, when you do it the way Kehanim do it. That's the only way that it's us. So that's what the Bach says, is the explanation for Taisvis's confusion, and Taisus not understanding the missing the Gemara Ksubis. That's what the Bach says. Now, other Achronim say other different reasons. There's a Ramban that's mashma from a Yerushalmi, that anytime you don't duchen with davening, just saying Yivarecha when it's not al Seder Atfilah is not duchening. Duchening can only be with davening. The Iker Takana was only gezakt with davening. There's Yerushalmi like that, and the Ramban seems to paskin like that. So maybe that's another thing. When Rabbi Yossi says I would duchen, he meant I would duchen not with davening. Like if I duchen, I would go up and give a bracha. I'd stand on the bima.
Duchening without a bracha and without Nesiyas Kapayim, would that be considered a good duchen?
Probably not. I mean, that's not the Iker Takana. You can't make a bracha on that. A kohen who wants to duchen without, you don't make a bracha. A kohen doesn't make a bracha. You can do it without a bracha, just giving a bracha.
No, I'm talking about with tefillah.
With tefillah.
If he did it without Nesiyas Kapayim and without...
Oh no, it has to be with Nesiyas Kapayim.
I know it has to be, but if he didn't...
He's not yet to the mitzvah. No, it's not...
So then it's hard to understand the other way.
What do you mean?
How was Rabbi Yossi going to go ahead and say that I would do it? And the answer is he would have done duchening.
The Bach is, you're agreeing with the Bach. I'm saying that's what the Bach is saying. The Bach is saying you have to learn that Rabbi Yossi meant this is the only way that it's possible to do it.
No, that's a problem, because if it doesn't work for a Kohen if he didn't do it, it wouldn't work for Yisrael if he didn't do it.
Exactly. He's saying Rabbi Yossi's figuring out a workaround.
It's not a workaround.
It's a workaround where I could do what looks like duchening without duchening.
Okay, but that's not duchening.
That's his point.
Okay,
of course, Rabbi Yossi can't duchen. I could duchen without duchening.
Got it.
That's what the Bach is saying. So now, this is the Bach's thing, and this is what many Achronim say. Many different Achronim have different eitzes. Now, if you look in Shulchan Aruch, it's gepaskin that someone who's not a kohen is not allowed to duchen. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Now, the Bir Halach over there in Simon Kuf Chav Ches brings, he says he says, you have to wonder, he says, how is it that people bench their friends constantly and use Yivarechacha? He's asking that you see, the minute that he brings is that when someone's Yotzel Derech on the way to travel, he says Yivarechacha to his friend. How do people do that? How do parents bench their children? How do we do that? So says the Mishabur, he brings the Bach, he says, Mistama ula yeshlem v'detama minig, shu desvirlu kahabach. The dafka b'prisis yadayim over hazar ba'aseh. The aseh is only if you're doing a prisis yadayim. If you don't do it the proper duchening way, you're not over in the aseh. Inami, the kivin the tikkun rabban shlei lisa kafayim b'lei tefillah, he brings that second tarot, since it's about tefillah, shuv mishayim b'psuchim elu shabirchas kanyin b'lei tefillah, it doesn't, that doesn't make a violation. Now this is the Bach, the Mishabura, and this is something that everyone's semach on some level, because we all do Yivarechacha, we all say it to our children, we all do this bracha, and some people do it in many more occurrences. Now there are those who want to say that the reason why the Gaon was makbid to only bench with one hand is another eitzah of not priestess kapayim. Meaning if you take two hands and you put them on your children's head, even if it's not exactly the way the duchenig is, but that's already, priestess kapayim, you're stretching out your hands. But if you do one hand, a Gaon can't duchen with one hand. So maybe this is what the Torah Tamim actually, who brings the story in his version, without dirty strimlach, without all that, he says this.
But there's no Vilna. No one's making a bracha either.
No, that's true. You have multiple terutzim, but he's saying could be the Gaon was held of this chumrah to be medactic, not to do it without only do it with one hand. Now we don't have another source that's like a mahalach. None of the achronim that I'm being miyashiv the steer of Taisus and the Gemara say that. It's just like maybe that's what the Gaon's chumrah was. Now, in any case, I think this is Zichr Nichlal on the Geder of Yafasi Chassan Shal Talmud Chachamim. It's a story from the Gaon. It's a hanhaga that seems to be that the Gaon had. For whatever reason, it came to be. And these are some of the various, mystical or halachi rationales for the Gaon's minhag. Make of it what you want.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.